Okay, so I in class will be talking this afternoon about the generations of computers. So when we say class generations, we are further classifying class our computers into different types of generation. So right now, what do you think class is the generation of our computer? Is it the first, second, third, fourth, or in the fifth generation? Anybody? So what's your idea, class? At which generation do our computers belong? Is it the first, second, third, fourth, or the fifth generation? Okay, so commonly, class, what we do experience now is that we are in the mix of the fourth and the fifth generation. So in the fourth generation class, meant to say our computers are based on microprocessor. Hence, class, we have here the very popular class microprocessor. We have your Intel, and then the other one is we have from AMD processor. So these are the two giants when it comes to manufacturers of microprocessor, Intel and AMD Corporation. So in the fifth generation class, we do experience this one because we do have now class these so-called class thinking machines. Like for example, we are able class to interact with them through our voices. Like we have Alexa, Google Home, and so with those different voice-operated machines, those devices class that are capable of machine learning, and so class we have the robots. They do belong class to the fifth generation of computers. So right now, we are actually in the mix of the fourth and the fifth generation. So more of this class will be discussed. But before going through the fourth and the fifth generation, uh, we will be discussing class the other generations of computer, which are the first, second, and the third, so that we will also understand how do this generation uh, advances the technology as we move from one generation to the other generation. Okay, so here are our learning objectives. You should be able, class, to identify the characteristics of each generation of computer. So, mean to say, class, you will gain understanding what are these characteristics and what are these technologies used in each generation of computer. So, perhaps you will understand, class, what technology do we have in during the first generation, second, third, fourth, and the fifth generation. And then you should be able to identify some inventions as well as, class, the different inventors in the generations of computer. So when we say, class, generation, we will say there is a state of improvement in the product development process. So mean to say, class, there is something what we call, class, an improvement. So there's a change. Hence, mean to say, these types of computers are different from the others because of the technology being employed in each generation. So this creates, class, the so-called generations of computer. So there are different technologies used in these types of computer. As the advances is technology. So this advancement of technology to these types of computer or to these computers, we call them as generation. So they are also, class, the different advancements of new computer technology. So mean to say there are new technologies introduced, class, in each of the generation of these computers. So later you will understand what are these technologies used in each generation of computer. So in the first generation of computers, class, it was dated from 1940 to 1956. So all those computers belonging to these dates from 1940 to 1956 did do belong to first generation computer. So what are the characteristics of this first generation of computers? Any idea? Last, any idea from you in the class? What are these characteristics of the first generation computers? Okay. So we have class, the first generation of computers were characterized by the use class of vacuum tubes, which was invented or developed by Dr. Lee DeForest. So again, class, in the first generation of computers, it is characterized by the use class of vacuum tubes. So we're in this vacuum tubes class are like an electric bulb, wherein inside the electric bulb there is a filament which will produce class electrodes, or which will produce electrons, and after producing class the electron, thereby it permits class the electricity to flow. So in this case, in the first generation class, again, it makes use of vacuum tubes, and then inside these vacuum tubes, it has a very hot filament which will produce electrons. And then this vacuum tubes class, this regulates the flow of electricity within your device. So since class, it regulates the flow of electricity, once this vacuum tubes is operated, it produces lots of heat. At the same time, since they were also the one who produced electrons, it also consumes class lots of electricity. While during at this period from 1940 class to 1956, this since this was only the technology used class, they were known as the king of electronics because there were no other technologies used to develop computers except for vacuum tubes. Hence, it is given the title as the king of electronics. And then from here, we could also say, class, that your vacuum tubes were not efficient when using electricity because, of course, they consume class lots of electricity in order to produce class electrons to regulate the flow class of electricity in a device. So here's how your vacuum tubes looks like. So it consists here, class, the different tubes, and then inside these tubes it has these filaments which will produce electrons. Okay. So again, it was invented, class, by Dr. Lee DeForest. So here are class devices which belongs to the first generation of computers. The class is we have your ENIAC. ENIAC is a short for Electronic Numerical Integrator and Calculator, which was invented, class, by John Mauchly and Christopher Eckert Jr. So this was the world's first operational general-purpose electronic digital computer. So I mean to say, it now performs, class, what a computer can do. But then, since class is and these are powered, class, by vacuum tubes, and then this computer is capable, class, of performing 5,000 calculations per second. So it is quite faster as compared, class, to those computers which we have mentioned in the history of computers. And it has about, class, 18,000 vacuum tubes. So if you could imagine, class, there are it uses lots of vacuum tubes to regulate, class, the flow of electricity. So it contains, class, it serves, class, as the logic gate period. So again, it has about 18,000 vacuum tubes. And then it weighed, class, about 30 tons. So if you can imagine, class, it's very heavy. And it consumes, class, 2,000 kilowatts of power. So to say, it is really power intensive. So it consumes, class, lots of electricity in order to use this device. And then, of course, class, normally, if a device, class, consumes a lot of electricity, I mean to say, this device also gets very hot once this device is started to operate. And then, since, class, it generates lots of heat while in operation, I mean to say, it is also prone for overheating. So these are the problems encountered during the first generation of computers. It consumes lots of electricity, and then since it consumes lots of electricity, it dissipates lots of heat, and hence it is prone for overheating. And since they are prone for overheating, class, they are again prone for failure. Okay, so they are just short-lived devices because it generates, and because they are prone for overheating. Again, that's your ENIAC. Then here's how your ENIAC looks like. So it can occupy class single room. Okay, so it can occupy class a single room, and then it is very heavy, which weighed about class 3,030 tons. And it was again invented by John Mockley and Christopher Eckert Jr. Then another aside class from ENIAC, an improvement of ENIAC was developed, which is also known class or named as Electronic Discrete Variable Automatic Computer, or in short, it has the acronym of EDVAC. Okay, so it has some essential designs, or it has innovations based on the device, or based on the computer developed by Mockley and Eckert. So from ENIAC, it was developed, and it named this computer as your EDVAC. So one improvement class of EDVAC is that it only consumed 30% of ENIAC's vacuum tubes. So if ENIAC class uses 18,000, so lesser na ang number of vacuum tubes used by EDVAC computer. And one characteristic class of this EDVAC computer is that this is the first computer which employed binary arithmetic for simpler circuitry and stored program capability. So it is now capable of performing class binary arithmetic. So in Z1 computer class, the Z1 computer, it only uses class binary system. But when it comes to EDVAC, it now performs class computation, or it employs class logic gates or binary arithmetic for simpler circuitry and a stored program capability. So this is your EDVAC. This is how your EDVAC class looks like. So again, it is just an innovation of your ENIAC by Mockley and Christopher Eckert Jr. And then from ENIAC class, or from EDVAC, another innovation or enhancement was created, and then they call this computer as Universal Automatic Computer, which is acronym of UNIVAC. Okay, so UNIVAC class was also the first commercial computer delivered to a business client, which is in U.S. Census Bureau in the year 1951. So from ano class? From punch card tabulating machine, they also used this UNIVAC, the Universal Automatic Computer, to speed up their census process. Since, as we have known, there are lots of people class in US, so that is why they need more devices class, or they need this high performing machine to help them in their census. So one of these improving UNIVAC. Okay, so it only contains class 5,000 vacuum tubes, which is of course much lesser as compared class to ENIAC and EDVAC. So it only contains 5,000 vacuum tubes, but then again, they are still based class on vacuum tubes technology. As what we have known, any computer class based on vacuum tubes dissipates lots of heat, consumes lots of electricity, at the same time they are prone for overheating. So from 30 tons, UNIVAC now weighed up to 8 tons. So still class, it is very heavy computer. So I mean to say, since they are very heavy, they are not portable. So this is how your UNIVAC looks like. So much smaller as compared class to your ENIAC and EDVAC. Pero still class is heavy, which weighed up to 8 tons. So here are the disadvantages class of those computers which are based on vacuum tubes. One is that it consumes large amount of electricity. So since class they consume lots of electricity, they are dissipating lots of heat. At the same time, class that requires more energy, and then they dissipate lots of heat, and then dissipates lots of heat, they are prone for overheating class or failure. So these are the problems class encountered in the first generation of computers. So with these problems class encountered, they now wanted to design a new computer which will help counter this problem. So with those in mind, this now brought forth to the second generation computer. So from your second generation computer, classes are now based on transistors. So from vacuum technology or vacuum tubes, this shifted class to transistors. So transistors class are composed of semiconductor material that amplifies a signal or opens or closes a circuit. So again, class, long before these transistors were developed, we have there your vacuum tubes. So your vacuum tubes class, as what I have mentioned earlier, they are used to generate electrons. So mean to say, if this vacuum tube is not producing an electron, meant to say that is a closed circuit, or that is called class an open circuit. If this circuit class produces electricity, so it has electrons in them, mean to say that it is an open circuit. So electricity can flow freely into this circuit board. So from vacuum tubes, we replace that with a transistor. Okay, so your transistor class is known as the building block for all modern electronics. Mean to say, class, by the use class of transistors, you are able to build class these portable devices that we have right now. Like for example, class, our smartphones, laptops, desktops that we have, mobile gadgets class. These were based class on transistors. So by the invention class of transistors, miniaturization of our devices comes along. So it is safe to say, class, that without invention class of transistors, we would not have enjoyed portable devices right now, because it would be perhaps based on vacuum tubes technology. But then again, we do have this transistor, which made it possible to make our devices smaller and smaller, so that they are very portable. And then again, compared class to vacuum tubes, and transistors are superior, because again, they don't transistors were no longer it helped us develop smaller devices, and computers class are now becoming more portable. And then again, it only consumes class lesser amount of electricity as compared to transistors, and then as compared class to vacuum tubes, as well as class these transistors doesn't dissipate lots of heat. And then since they no longer dissipate lots of heat, mean to say they are no longer class prone for overheating. And again, they are smaller size. It helps us to develop smaller size of computer. And then again, they only generate low heat, and then we have high reliability, because again, these devices based class on transistors are not prone for overheating. And then it only class requires small power to operate. So this is how your transistor looks like. Okay, so again, that's your second generation computer. So they are now based class on transistors. And then from transistors class, from transistors, we do have your integrated circuits. So still class, your integrated circuits is composed of several transistors. So again, this technology class is still based on transistor, except that in your integrated circuit, it now combines class several transistors together, put into a single circuit known as class your integrated circuit. So again, your integrated circuit class, or in short, IC, it consists class of several transistors placed together on the same circuit. So the invention class of integrated circuit brought forth your third generation computers from 1964 to 1971. So it started in the year 1958 when Jacobi demonstrated that it was possible to integrate various components. So with this, since Jacobi demonstrated that it is possible to integrate several components, it also gave them the idea that transistors class could be placed together in one circuit and operate as a single unit. So with this idea, they have created class the so-called integrated circuit. So in the integrated circuit, the transistors were then miniaturized and placed class on a silicon chip called as a semiconductor. So I mean to say these integrated circuits, again, as I have mentioned earlier, it consists class of several transistors which were miniaturized and placed together on a semiconductor. And then it combined multiple circuits on a single chip. And then with this invention, it enabled lower cost and faster processors and memory elements. So this is now how your integrated circuits look like. So from a single transistor, it is miniaturized and placed class in a single circuit, which we call class your integrated circuit. So again, the first generation class makes use of vacuum tubes. Then second generation, it makes use class of transistor. And then from the third generation, it has shifted to integrated circuit. So when you say class IC technology, so it means to say for photographically imprinting a circuit to contain many transistors and fabricating many transistors on a single chip. So this is now that the technology they use to create class integrated circuit. They call that one as IC technology. So the technology used class to combine several transistors into a single circuit or a single chip. And then we have here Robert Noyce. So Robert Noyce class was one of the inventors of the integrated circuit, wherein he commented on the modern computers when compared class to ENIAC, wherein our modern computers nowadays is 20 times faster, okay, because we use a class of integrated circuit. The same time class has a larger memory and is 1,000 times reliable, consumes the power of a light bulb rather than that of a locomotive, which and occupies 1 over 30,000 volume and costs over 1 over 10,000 as much. So mean to say class, with the use class of integrated circuits, we are able to develop more reliable computers as compared class to the first generation of computers, which are based on vacuum tubes. So it is cost effective and it has larger memory capacity. The same time class, it consumes lesser amount of electricity to operate, and then it is much portable because they are not very heavy as compared class to your first generation of computers. And then in the fourth generation, these integrated circuits class were then grouped together to create a single chip, which we call class as your microprocessor. Okay, so from a single transistor, we build class integrated circuit, and then from group class of integrated circuit, we are able to build your microprocessor. Okay, so when you say class microprocessor, it consists class of several integrated circuits placed together on a single silicon chip. So again, it consists class of group of integrated circuits. So in the fourth generation, we have this so-called class, the Lsi Technology, or which stands for Very Large Scale Integration. So, I mean to say, Very Large Scale Integration class, it consists of thousands of transistors integrated into a single chip. And then when you say small scale integration, it only combines two transistors. And then we also have class your MSI, or medium scale integration, which combines hundreds of logic gates. But then again, in the fourth generation, it is the base class on VLSI technology. So it combines thousands of transistors into a single chip known as your microprocessor. So in a microprocessor class, it has these logic gates. So when we say logic gate, it is a logical device in a computer which opens and closes a circuit. So from vacuum tubes class, which typically opens and closes a circuit in the first generation, it has changed to logic gate. So by the use class of microprocessor. So we also have class your LSI technology, which combines at least 1,000 logic gates. So this is now class our modern day microprocessor. So there are two major companies class who are developing microprocessors for computers. One is Intel, and then the other one is AMD. So we also have different processor class for our devices. For our smartphones, we also use different processors intended for mobile devices, which only consume lesser amount of electricity or power as compared to those microprocessors which are employed in laptops as well as in desktop computer. Again, our computers nowadays are base class. Typically, they do belong to fourth generation. And if your device class is capable of machine learning, it belongs to fifth generation computer. And here are class some technological advances in the fourth generation. Since class in the fourth generation, computers are now becoming more powerful as compared to the first, second, and the third generation computers, because they are now based class on microprocessor. So they are now the more powerful as compared class to the rest of the generation of computers. So in the year 1971, that was the year when the first microprocessor was created by Ted Hoff, and which was introduced class by Intel Corporation. So more or less class, it was the Intel Corporation who first developed the microprocessor. So right now, what we have this time is we do have Intel Core i5. I guess you are familiar with that. Core i5, 8th gen, 11th gen, 12th gen. So these are generations class of microprocessor. So Core i5, Core i3, so Core i8, mga octa-core. So these are very powerful computing devices. So again, it started class in the year 1971 when Ted Hoff created the microprocessor, and then it was introduced class by Intel Corporation. And then in the year 1973, it was the year class when the internet was developed. And then in the 2 years after, in the year 1975, MITS released class your Alter Basic, which is a computer which is developed by college dropouts who are Bill Gates class and Paul Allen, who later founded class the Microsoft company in the year 1976. So 1 year after, they created a company known class as your Microsoft. So they were a technical class that they were college dropouts. So they don't finish their college and they focus class on their company, which is Microsoft. And then right now, Microsoft Class is one of the giants when it comes to software development. They own class the Microsoft Office that we are using right now, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and a lot more products class under Microsoft. Then in the year 1976, the Crayon supercomputer class was developed. It was the fastest and most powerful computer during its time. The Crayon supercomputer, again, it was in the year 1976. Then in the year class 1979, Robert Barnaby was able class to create a word processing software known as your WordStar. So WordStar class is very much similar with a Microsoft Word that we have. So except that it has different capability, but still class, it is a word processing software. So when we say class word processing software, this is where we can create documents like memos, letters, brochures, book reports, research paper. We can do that using a word processing software. And then WordStar was the first word processing software which is developed by Robert Barnaby. Then in the year 1981, the word class personal computer was introduced. Again, class, the year 1981, the word personal computer was introduced by IBM Corporation when they released class the IBM PC or the IBM personal computer, which was intended for use in homes, offices, and schools. So hence class, the word personal computer came into existence because, again, IBM released their IBM PC. So muna na nga, we do have this word personal computer. Then in the year 1983, Lotus 123 class was released. So it was a spreadsheet application software. So perhaps class, we can compare Lotus 123 with Microsoft Excel at what we have right now. So it allows us to perform computation, and we can create a formula using a spreadsheet application software. So it was intended for use on microcomputers. Then in the year class 1984, HP introduced the LaserJet printer for PCs. So we now have class this advanced type of printing, a high quality printer known as your LaserJet printer. And again, it was HP who first produced this LaserJet printer. So it is very high quality class type of printer. So perhaps class, you can imagine class those printers used to print class magazines. They are using LaserJet printer for that. Then in the year 1985, Kratos supercomputer was released po. So from Crayon supercomputer, na-release na po sila og new type of supercomputer, and then they named that one as Kratos supercomputer. And this was used for mathematical studies of a very complex problems, like we now have speech analysis, weather forecasting, and many other operations. So typically class, when we do mathematical studies, we really need class these computers with a high computing capability, because with high computing capability means that you can solve problems at a very high speed as compared to those computers which do not have this capability. And then on the same year, Microsoft introduced class your Windows operating system. So Windows class, these are the operating system developed by Microsoft Corporation. Like we have your Windows 98, Windows 99, Windows ME, then Windows 7, Windows XP, Windows Vista, Windows 8, then we have Windows 10. And then current class, their most recent Windows OS was your Windows 11. So that's their most recent operating system, which is Windows 11. Then in the year 1989, Timothy Berners-Lee created class your World Wide Web. So again, that was in the year 1989 when the internet was made to the public, and it was known class as your World Wide Web. So with Timothy Berners-Lee creation class of the World Wide Web, he's also given the title as the father of the World Wide Web. Again, that was the father of the World Wide Web, That was Timothy Berners-Lee. Then in the year 1991, Steve Jobs, who is the founder class of Apple Corporation, he invented the PalmTop computer. So from PalmTop, it has developed us into a prestigious company known as your Apple Incorporated. Then the year 1992, the Pentium computer was announced. So Pentium class is now a processor developed by Intel Corporation. So they now try to use class Pentium microprocessor in a computer. So that was the time when computers class are now becoming more popular for use in homes and offices. And they are now more powerful as compared to the other computer because they are based on Pentium microprocessor. And then this computer class popularized the use class of CD-ROM drives. So perhaps, as you can imagine, those computers which allows you to insert CD or DVD. So uh, these examples of CD-ROM drives that we have in the year 1992. While in the next 5 years, the year 1997, the IBM machine, known as your Deep Blue supercomputer, was invented and was able to make 100 million chess points per second. And this computer was able to beat Garry Kasparov, who is the reigning chess champion. So with this time class, computer was able to beat the reigning chess champion, who is Garry Kasparov. So me to say, since the computer class was able to beat Garry Kasparov, so we could say class that our computers are really improving. So they are now capable class of thinking because once you start playing class with a computer, it runs some sort of algorithms to beat its opponent. It has this class different learning algorithm in order class to beat the opponent. So it makes use class of artificial intelligence. But then at that time, it was not termed class as artificial intelligence, but then it was just called learning algorithms. And then from there, in the fifth generation, it introduces class the so-called artificial intelligence. So take note class that in the year 1997, that was the first time that a Deep Blue supercomputer was able to beat the reigning chess champion. So in order to do that, it makes use class of the different learning algorithms. Since the learning algorithms were now developed, it now brings forth the fifth generation computer, which are based class on artificial intelligence, or the so-called class AI. So computers class are now becoming more and more advanced. So they are now capable of learning. So perhaps class, when you fed thousands or 10,000 class of images, these computers are now able to recognize this image. So for example, class, perhaps you might want to start class creating a program which will identify whether this image is a cat or dog. So you can do that as a simple machine learning problem to start with, and then you can fed class. You will experience class once you do these things. You will experience that you have to fed thousands of data, thousands of images of cats, thousands of images for dogs, just to make your computer able to identify that this image is a dog while this one is a cat. So that one. So computers class are now capable of learning. So this both for class the field of artificial intelligence. So when we say class artificial intelligence, it is now a branch of computer science which deals with making computers behave like humans. So when we say that class, we want to make our computers to identify, recognize objects, and derive meanings from what it sees. For example, it is able to identify class your face, identify who you are, identify your basic attributes. So we are now making class, we are teaching computers how they learn. So of course, we still need class human being because we were the ones who fed data to the computer so that this computer can learn on its own. So by doing so, our computer class are now becoming more powerful as compared to the other generations of computer. So it's also known class as your thinking machines. So they are able to generate their own data based on the data which were given to them previously. So like for example, the one which I have mentioned earlier about creating a machine learning application which will identify class whether this one is a dog or this image is a cat. You are going to feed several images of cats and dogs, and then after which you try to let this computer identify whether this image is a dog or a cat. So we try to make computers behave like human being. So perhaps class, one good example class of application of artificial intelligence are those um, devices like robots, which were employed class in some industries to perform crucial operations class, especially class for car manufacturing company. So car manufacturers class, they have their own robots. Like for example, Honda, they have their own robot class to perform uh, crucial operations which are very difficult for a human being to accomplish. So they employ robots for that. A sample class of these thinking machines are voice recognition systems. So where in class they make use of their voice to identify individual. So perhaps class using speech synthesis, but by the tone of your voice, you're able to recognize who you are. So these are part class of voice recognition systems. Then we also have class your image recognition systems. One very good examples class of image recognition systems are the ones employed by Facebook. So have you noticed class that when you try to upload an image which contains your friend specifically class over Facebook, it gets automatically tagged. Have you encountered that one? So when you try to upload image, it identifies who are these persons in your image, especially for those who are your friends over Facebook, and then tag them as part of your image. So that's part class of image recognition system. So they tried to identify who are these individual in your picture by using class your faces. So Facebook class, they have their own learning algorithm to identify these individuals found in the picture. Or perhaps class, if you could also see when you have a very low data connectivity. So instead of displaying class the entire picture, what you can see there are text or sentences describing what the picture is all about. Okay, have you encountered that one? That instead of a picture, it gives you a description of what this picture is all about. So that is still part of their learning algorithm to create descriptions class or captions for images. We call that one class as auto captioning. So it was not generated manually, but it was generated class automatically by the sort class or by the use class of artificial intelligence. We do have class learning algorithms for that. And then robots class. Robots which can behave like human, act like human being, and talk class like a human being. Then we also have class right now, prestigious universities of abroad, like MIT, they are into research class on self-driving cars, or we call them class as autonomous cars. So self-driving, so there's no driver, they just drive by itself. You just have to input class your destination, and then it will find its way to reach the destination desired by the passenger. So we call that one as self-driving cars, and there are a lot of researches done onto this side. So of course, it requires lots of funding to do this research. So that is why only these universities with very high funding, and they do have class sponsors like NVIDIA, and so with other big companies who sponsor the research. Then we also have class the so-called chatbots. So chatbots class, into say these are just robots who responds to chats. So like for example class, Mart and Globe, they have their Facebook accounts, and then when you try to chat on them, they do respond, but then what these responses class were automated responses. So they were responded, we are responded by our chatbots. Okay, just to cater our problems that we encounter, but perhaps class we could still encounter that we do have class bad encounters with these chatbots. Actually, if we have problems class with regards to our devices or promos we offer, like for example, internet connectivity, we are not able to connect to the internet, and then we chat to them, we just respond with a chatbot, and it's really not so good experience. But at least we do respond. But somehow class, they also allow us to connect to real chat agents. But somehow, that's one good thing about chatbots, to communicate class, to facilitate automated communication. And it also a big use class for companies to cater class um, problems or concerns with their clients. Like for example, we have Smart Chatbot, we also have Globe Chatbot, and a lot more chatbots available class integrated, which are also integrated class over Facebook Messenger. And then we also have class example, the Google Translate. So Google Translate class that is based on artificial intelligence. They do have their own learning algorithm class to translate word sentences, but somehow class Google Translate, they translate the words or the sentence we have literally. So that is why you could see things class. You could take some funny translations over Google Translate, because again, we just translate class somehow literally, not semantically translation. And then we also have class um, mga assistants like Alexa, Google Assistant, and Siri. So Alexa from Amazon, Google Assistant class or assistant from Google, and then Apple, we have here your Siri. So those are class examples of devices which are based on artificial intelligence. So currently, artificial intelligence class is still a lot more research to conduct and a lot more things that could happen in the future in the field class of artificial intelligence. So perhaps class you might be interested class on to research somehow. So you could take class courses like computer science to further your knowledge class on artificial intelligence, or perhaps class going further with statistics. This statistics is also a good foundation to have understanding on artificial intelligence. So for class questions or clarifications?